How about a quick news roundup? Just because some big names were out there doing stuff. Um, Mike Chandler and Conor McGregor. Well, Chandler, I should say, I guess, got a little bit of life breathed into him because McGregor tweeted that, "Hey, I spoke to Dana White. You and I are still going to do this, and in 2024." Do you believe him, Mike?
I believe that's what he believes, if that makes sense. So
Uh-huh.
we'll say that much. I think they want this fight to happen in December, the final pay per view. They're not going to create a new fight card date for it, as had maybe been speculated after the 303 fight was canceled right away. So if I had to put my money on it, they're going to try to book this for December. Whether it actually happens and we get another pullout and stuff is a whole different question. But I do think at some point we get McGregor Chandler announced for December, and then we're on the road to that. But that is freaking half a year away, man. And as we know with Conor McGregor, anything can happen in half a year. Multiple things can happen in half a year. So fingers crossed.
Goes, do you think it happens? What'd you think of that tweet? I mean, it's just seems like the same old stuff over and over again.
There's just so much drama, man, with this fight, and we got so close to it that now having that taken away from you, I'm kind of with Mike. Like, I don't know. I just feel like let me know when we're like a week away, and maybe I'll get fired up. But I just don't want to get let down again. I think we talked about this yesterday a little bit, George. And honestly, I don't know. I just feel like this fight's not going to happen, man. It just
It's
it feels
sad.
snake
It's
bitten.
sad to see that tweet, and it's sad to see just someone get iced like Chandler has. He could have done so much since then, even if he took 1 year off after the Poirier loss, which was 1-1 going into round 3, and then Poirier got the finish. But man, I don't know. And then McGregor, obviously, his fall from superstardom as well. How about Jon Jones tweeted something about, "I'm at LAX, I might lose a finger." Of course, he takes it down, but because this guy's acts like such a clown at times, it's like who even has the time to invest in that when I'm watching a European final or a Copa America final or baseball or whatever. But then we discover there might be other stuff going. Mike, bring us up to date. What do we know about Jones in that regard, or anything else? Because that's another guy that we're frustrated with. And you talked about the December fight card. Well, there's one in November in New York that's supposed to highlight Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic, right? But bring us up to date.
Yeah, that is the plan as of now. From my understanding, Jon Jones has been very open about it. November 9th, UFC 309 is what they're targeting for. I asked Dana about it after 302 because I think Jones had put it out there. He's like, knock on wood. I don't know if Jones needs like complete medical clearance or whatever it is. I don't know what those tweets were about. I've tried to dig a little bit. Not really anyone getting back to you as far as that. So I don't know what happened the other night, if he had indulged in something and maybe just getting on the phone, or if he did hurt himself. I don't know. So can't say too much, but literally like a couple minutes before we came on the show, first reported by Damon Martin of MMA Fighting, that he was charged with 2 misdemeanors in Albuquerque stemming from the incident in March where the drug-free sport tester came to his home and he took the phone. There was the whole incident. We saw some camera footage, et cetera, et cetera. You guys might know better than me from my knowledge and kind of following Jon Jones incidents in New Mexico legally over the year. These don't really seem like they're going to be meaningful charges in any way, 2 misdemeanors in that state in particular. I don't know if his history gets taken into account, things like that. It's kind of hard to say. It's really fresh news, but it doesn't seem like this is going to have an impact on his timeline to return, et cetera, et cetera. So we're kind of in an unknown stage right now. I know they want to do November, but as I kind of just said with Conor McGregor, like November is what, 5 months away, 4 months away, 4.5.
Yeah.
That's a long time to get to a Jon Jones fight. So anything can happen, but do I believe he wants to fight then? Do I believe Stipe wants to fight then? Do I believe the UFC wants the fight to happen then? Yes. So we'll see.
If an alleged hit and run didn't get him anything serious, he's just going to get a noogie for screaming at this young lady. Crystal Martinez, I think was her name, or something like that. Just trying to do her job. Guess he was taking a nap celebrating his birthday. I don't know, and he just didn't want to be bothered. But yeah, that's that story from a few months ago coming to light. And as far as the finger, we don't know much, folks. But yeah, the gut feeling for me seems to be like that fight's not going to come together. But I'm really excited about Aspinall and Blades, and maybe that becomes a bigger fight than we think it is because of these doubts we have. But what do you think about this whole Jones thing goes? Like I said, we followed his career for a long time. It kind of gets old. Somebody had an interesting tweet. Sorry, a post there. With every tweet, it just becomes he becomes less meaningful. You know what he's trying to say. Do you almost feel the same way with this type of news?
Less is more, and we just kind of get over it. And it's so weird because like some of the stuff is just so borderline silly. The finger thing, just the things he says. But like Mike said, it's a long time, right? A very long time. And every day that goes by, that fight seems more and more ridiculous. And once Aspinall fights, and if he goes in there and he mops the floor, does a great performance, it's going to look even dumber and dumber. I'm not seeing it, man. I don't know. It's the whole Jon Jones thing is starting to get on my nerves a little bit.
In my 2024 bold predictions column in beginning of January, I predicted we get one combined fight this year between Jon Jones and Conor McGregor. I thought maybe that was a little bit under, but if we get two, it's going to come right under the wire. So we'll see.
I agree. Mark England says just take the title off him already. And I did see some of these numbers. Their level of interest for this weekend was a 1 from Oatmeal, 2.6, Lazy Bet a 3.7, Steve Williams a 5. Out Simon. 1 foot out the door, 5 out of 10. We're talking about the upcoming Apex card. Ernie B, a 6. So yeah, they're not excited there. UFC needs some big announcements or something. I don't know. I just want to close up, guys. Oh, and by the way, Mateus Gamrot and Dan Hooker have been signed. So that lightweight division's shaken out. We expect Arman Sarukian to do his public service announcement and probably face Islam Makhachev. It'll just be under the 6 months of what the commission was looking for in terms of getting him, to fight in Abu Dhabi. And then I guess if Chandler gets matched up against McGregor, the one thing I am hoping for is a Poirier-Diaz fight. I don't care if it's boxing, in the streets, or in MMA, but I'd love to see those two guys fight. I think they're big stars, and they could make a lot of money and get the fans fucking pumped on a Saturday night. That's where everyone's calling each other saying, what are you doing for the fight? Come on over. That would be a great fight, Poirier versus Nate. Do you know anything about that, Mike? Does that have any chance of ever happening? I know it seems like a long shot for Diaz to come back, even though he says he wants to come back. And Poirier, it ain't easy for him to just bounce and go box. I think he has to fulfill something from the UFC, unless he's in the good graces of the UFC where he'd be allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything right now besides just what Dustin said. He still has like 5 fights left on his contract, so it would have to be a similar situation to Masvidal where they allow him well under contract to go do boxing matches against a select group of names. But yeah, I don't know. I think if Nate Diaz does business with the UFC again in that regard, it'll be to come back and fight in MMA, and Poirier would be an option. McGregor would be an option. It's kind of all up in the air. Obviously, Diaz just fought, so I imagine there's going to be a little time before he figures out his next move.
One question that came through the chat, it was really early. I saw it and I saved it. Let's talk about it. It's a very interesting question since basically the show's coming to an end. Beavis and Butthead wants to know, how did you guys get your jobs at MMA Junkie? What got you into MMA? Were you fans before MMA Junkie? Goes, you want to answer that first?
Man, I mean, that is a really, really long question or answer. But the short of it was by accident. I was watching ESPN and they were actually showing Pancrase. It was Boss Rudin and I think Frank Shamrock or Ken Shamrock. And I thought it was pro wrestling. And I'm like, wait a minute, these guys are actually hitting themselves. And that kind of just rolled into something else. And then when UFC 1 came out in the Gracies, I'm a smaller dude. So to see a small guy kind of take it to all these other fighters, I thought, well, this is amazing. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And from there, all that rolled into the MySpace years of it was so accessible fighters. I would interview them. And then from there, that turned into Tag Radio, the show that George and I started doing. And that turned into MMA Junkie Radio, and it just kind of spiraled. But honestly, we never thought this was never in the cards covering MMA. It just kind of happened, but luckily it happened in a sport that we feel like we helped make grow, and it's been a great ride. But if you ever want a longer answer to that, because there's a way longer answer to that, hit me up on social media and I'll direct you to some episodes where we go a little bit more in depth about that.
Yeah, so Beavis and Butthead, I was in your spot. I used to listen to a show called Sound Off on MMA Weekly with Frank Trigg and Ryan Bennett. The host, Ryan Bennett, passed away. Frank Trigg had kind of become a friend of ours a little bit, just knowing him through the show. And we actually got an opportunity to start a show called Tag Radio with Frank Trigg, which then became MMA Junkie Radio. So I used to be just like you, listening to a show, asking questions, comments, loved it, and that's how this came about. But like Go said, it is a long answer, a more detailed answer we could probably give you maybe on another occasion. How about you, Mike Bond?
Yeah, it's also kind of a long story, but the short version is started as just a huge fan of the sport. My first live event was UFC 67, February 2007. That was Anderson Silva and Travis Lutter as the main event. Crow Cop debuted on that card. Frankie Edgar debuted on that card. Rampage debuted on that card. Machida debuted on that card. So that's a crazy one to look back on. And as Dana White always says, at least something that's rung true with me, if you're like a fan on the verge and you haven't seen a live event, when you go, it just takes it to the next level, especially back then where it felt much more special. And once my kind of obsession came over, I started my own little website while I was in university, and would reach out to fighters on Twitter, trying to get any interviews I could, emails, things like that. First MMA related person I interviewed was John Anik. Second was Benson Henderson. And then did kind of my own thing for a year or so on the writing side. And our former editor-in-chief, MMA Junkie founder, Dan Stupp, reached out to me one day and said he was interested in seeing my work and if we could do something together. And essentially the rest is history. On August 1st, a couple of weeks from now, will be my 13-year anniversary with MMA Junkie.
Damn, I didn't know some of that, Mike. That's interesting. I just want to ask you something real quick. Did you interview Jon Anik when he was with Bellator at the time?
No, so he hadn't made his official broadcast debut yet. He had only done dry runs, and this was right after he had done his first pay-per-view dry run, calling the UFC Hall of Fame fight between Shogun and Dan Henderson at UFC 139, and he was getting ready for his first broadcast, which I believe was a UFC on FX card, if you remember those. Those are for the old schools. So yeah. Been a long time.
Folks might think I'm clowning, but he actually did season 1 of Bellator. I think it was ESPN Deportes or something like that. And now he's obviously a standout guy with the UFC play-by-play guy there. But yeah, no, that was a great question. And what Mike said rings true, because I became an even bigger BKFC fan. I went to BKFC on Friday in Temecula. It is crazy, folks. If you've always just been on the verge of going, go. It really, really, really made me a bigger fan of BKFC. And I want to go to one power slap, just to be fair. I'm not the biggest fan, but I learned something.
And you're not missing anything.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I will say for anyone who wants to go to a live UFC event who's never been before, I know tickets are insanely expensive now. Don't buy floor seats. What you want to do if you're in an arena, buy like 5-6 floors or rows off the floor, so you're on the same level as the cage, which is elevated off the ground. That's the best way you'll see it, and that's worth your money.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. Hey, let's just close with this, guys. Look, whether you like him or not, Donald Trump is a former president, right? And he's also running to get reelected. 95% of the MMA community loves the guy, including Dana White. He's a personal friend of his. What happened to him on Saturday is horrific. America is better than that. We're a democracy. We settle our elections by voting, not taking someone's life. And I know a few people wanted to see what we had to say about that. I just want to keep it short and sweet, but I really mean it. That was just a horrific act in the history, especially in the history of our country. And we really, really need to take the temperature down. And I know the president has spoken about this. And I'm not trying to repeat what he said, but it's so true. We kind of get in some ridiculous arguments over this stuff. And you see what it can lead to, man. A firefighter, I believe, an ex-firefighter lost his life protecting his family. And I think there's been some other injuries. This is really, really getting out of control, folks. but we're glad
As
that he
Genki
survived.
Sudo said, we are all one.
We are all one. Let's unite.